السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So inshallah, tonight we'll be going over juz number 5, the fifth juz. And this begins with verse number 24 of Surah An-Nisa. So in the very beginning, the very opening of this juz, which is verse number 24 of Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about those women that we are allowed to marry. And but then at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also talks about mahar. Mahar, for those people who may not know, mahar is the monetary amount that a husband must give to his wife before marrying. So this is something that's agreed upon before the marriage takes place. This is actually a condition. If there's no mahar, then there's no marriage. And this is something that has to be paid. As long as the husband does not pay his wife the mahar, that marriage is not considered consummated. It's not considered complete, and that is something that will stay on top of his head for the rest of his life. So it's not halal until you give that mahar. So this is a huge problem because especially we live in a time where I myself have seen people giving these. They promise these nearly impossible amounts of mahar. I mean, it's like a brother who'll be literally working in a gas station, but he'll be promising $1 million mahar to his wife. So these types of scenarios, this is something that obviously that individual has no intention of paying the mahar in the first place, and this is completely haram, right? Completely forbidden. And as long as you don't, pay it, it's on your head, and you need to pay it before you leave this world or before the marriage itself ends. And so it's something that we have to take seriously, especially the menfolk. We take it very lightly. We just put any number on there and without any real, just thinking, hoping that, inshallah, she'll forgive it. It's not right for us. We have no right to ask that, and it's wrong for us to go into the marriage with that kind of assumption. That's completely inappropriate. So that's the first, in the beginning part of this verse, in verse number 24 of Surah 4, Surah Nisa, at the beginning of the fifth juz. This is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes into straight away. Then after going down a few verses, then we go on to verse number 29. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, verse 29 and 30. So in these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now getting into the ethics of business. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la ta'kulu amwalakum bainakum bil batil illa an takuna tijaratan an taradun minkum. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is laying down the foundations of business ethics, that you should not consume the wealth, or use the wealth inappropriately. Whatever wealth you use, especially that wealth that is that comes in, because what happens is normally the money comes in and then it hasn't been distributed. It's not just for one person. If that money needs to come in, and then from there that money needs to be allocated in its appropriate areas. A lot of it needs to go back into the business. Then after that, you go into paying the employees, paying everybody. Then whatever's left over, the partners will keep. So you can't just take the money as soon as it comes in without notifying your partner, your business partners, and without getting the permission. These things are completely forbidden, and that's what this verse is saying. When you use someone else, to make sure that you use the money equitably, in a way that is understood, in a way that is appropriate, and that is agreed upon with all the parties that may have a vested interest. And but then and for those people who don't follow through, the very next verse number 30. So even in this, don't think that you can do whatever you want to your partners and to the shareholders. You can rob them blind, and then nothing's going to happen to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala issues a very stern warning for those people who use the wealth inappropriately, who without the permission, without the right, in the wrong way, without following the right guidelines and the ethics. So for them is a very severe punishment in the hereafter. And this can take, many shapes and forms. While the example I may have given was a business model, but this can be anything. It could be you going to work and working for your employers. And while you're working for your employers, You're in your cubicle, you're on your laptop or your computer, but you're not really doing work. You're doing other things. Maybe you're surfing the internet. So you're not using the time. So the time that you're getting paid for, you're not using that time properly, right? You're not being honest with that time, and you're cheating with that time. That's also included in this verse. Or maybe you are a service provider. You could be a mechanic or even a doctor, and you're going, and as soon as the people come for a service, right, whatever it may be, and you're just exploiting them and overcharging them, something that is again, that's not equitable, that's inappropriate. So you overcharge them for your services, then you will also be accounted for. Yeah, you may have maybe you made some extra money, right, at that time, or maybe by overcharging your customers generally and being, unethical in your practice, you may make some extra money. But at the same time, this money that you're consuming, it's not going to go unaccounted for. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is keeping track of all that you are doing. And on the day of judgment, at a time where you don't have time, where you're in a place and a time where you can't make amends anymore. In this world, you can still make amends. You can still pay for your mistakes and you can make up for it. But once you leave this world, or the people that you have done dhulm against, they leave this world, then they say it's too late. You can't do anything about it. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning us against being inappropriate in terms of how we conduct our business, how we use the wealth that's in our businesses, and also when you're yourself, you're being employed by someone, or you're a service provider. We have to be ethical. We have to be truthful in how we conduct our businesses. It reminds me of a story where I used to teach some students. So one of my students, he used to love chips, right? And there were some other kids that knew that. And this boy loved buying chips. He loved eating chips, period, any type. So what they would do is they would take advantage of it. It's like $1.50 bag of chips, but they would sell it to him for like $5-10, And unfortunately, it was a weakness of his, and he would just buy it. He's like, man, and he just pull out a fine, here, take it, and he would just start eating the chips. They knew that's his weakness, and they were exploiting him. Kind of how the pharmaceutical industries, or even some medical practices, they do. They just ridiculously overcharge people, and they know that people, they're in a tough state. They have no choice in some situation. Well, for this student, he had a choice, but he went for it anyways. So even that, that would be inappropriate. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in verse 131, he tells us, إِن تَجْتَنِبُوا كَبَائِرَ مَا تُنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ نُكَفِّرْ عَنْكُمْ سَيِّئَاتِكُمْ وَنُدْخِلْكُمْ مُدْخَلًا كَرِيمًا. That along the path of our life, whether it's the spiritual journey we are taking, whether it's our worldly life, we're going to make mistakes, And as long as we stay away from the major sins, in tajtanibu kaba'ir, that if you stay away from the major sins, right, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises to forgive our minor sins. I mean, how merciful is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I mean, think about it. We commit so many sins on a daily basis, and sins that we probably don't even remember. If someone to point it out, we probably wouldn't even know they were sins in the first place, even though it's our obligation, our responsibility as a Muslim to know these things. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His infinite mercy, right? In tajtanibu kaba'ir ma tunhawna anhu nukaffir ankum sayyi'atikum. Allah will forgive all of our minor sins if we just do this much, Then in verse number 32, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He lets us know that وَلَا تَتَمَنُّوا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبْنَ وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. That be happy with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Don't complain. This is a really common problem of ours, that we don't really appreciate what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Whether you live in a home or you live in an apartment, be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever He has given you, be thankful. Because by being thankful, that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us more. And don't complain. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give certain opportunities to certain people, and He'll give other opportunities to other people. So let's just say there's a poor man. A poor man will be sitting in the masjid, and you know how they have these fundraisers, and one of the brothers will just raise his hand like, oh, okay, I'll give $10,000. Now we don't have, many of us may not have that luxury to be able to donate that much in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't worry. That's not a big deal. Right? Whatever capacity Allah has given you, be satisfied. Same thing with the poor. Maybe a rich man will see a poor person, and he's seeing that he has time to devote to the masjid, and he's able to help and serve the masjid in a way that this rich man may not be able to. It doesn't matter. Whatever capacity, whatever opportunities Allah has provided us, we must be satisfied with whatever opportunities Allah has given us. And in those opportunities, make the best of it. Right? Please Allah in your own ways. But at the same time, this verse also touches upon the role, the roles of men and women. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given men, afforded them with some, strengths and some weaknesses, and Allah has given women some strengths and some weaknesses. Whatever Allah has given you, right, you must be satisfied. And this goes into the whole, subject matter of gender role in Islam, and the dispute of with or the discourse about feminism in Islam. This is obviously a very broad and a very detailed topic, one that probably requires its own, its own time slot. And today, obviously, we don't have time to go into right now. We have an entire juz. But I will just say, just a few things in Islam, just to kind of help people understand. First of all, what needs to be understood is that your women's right is not something exclusively for feminists. Women's right is something that is universal for all people of all cultures, of every background that you can imagine. This is something universal. So when you talk, if someone criticizes, let's just say, current secular feminists, you're not, if you make a comment or if you criticize them, you're not criticizing women's rights. You're not against women's rights, and that's very important to understand, because we all understand it in different ways and shit. I mean, Islamic feminism as opposed to secular feminism, and then feminism that, maybe 10, 15, 20 years back compared to today is very different. Is changed many times over, and it's not the same thing. And I don't even like to use the word Islamic something, because Islam by itself is a way of life. And what happens, you can't, Islam is it's a very broad and a very complex way of life, and you can't just minimize it to a certain philosophy. So that's the first thing that I want to kind of point out, that while Islam, it's, some may see it as a religion that really a religion that is all about women's rights. And really, Surah Nisa, if you read it from the very beginning until the end of the surah, the major role of the surah is women's rights. And this is especially 1400 years in Arabia, not just Arabia, sorry, the rest of the entire world. I mean, it was a patriarchal world. Women didn't have much of a place. Even in this country, only until very recently were women finally allowed to vote. So women's right is something that mankind, for the world itself, has really fallen short for a very long time. And when Islam came, this is one thing that Islam made. I mean, there's an entire chapter in the Quran that should show, whatever women's rights we talk about from an Islamic perspective, this is not just a philosophy. This is Islamic theology. It's a part of our religion. It's something that every Muslim has to obey and follow. So whatever you see now, because what happens, people look at the Muslim countries today and they tend to jump to judgment, and really what people don't realize, understand, is that what you see today, the oppression that exists between rulers, men and women and children, and in every way, shape and form, it's not because of following the laws of Sharia that we find ourselves in this situation, but it's a lack of following the laws of Sharia. And what's happened today is many especially post-colonial, the Muslim world, post-colonial rule, it was a very tumultuous time, a time where everybody's trying to get their own peace and trying to establish their own selves. And undoubtedly, people use Islam. The Islamic slogan was used constantly throughout the Muslim world in order to claim their own legitimacy, to claim their own sovereignty. But this doesn't mean that Islam was the foundation. It was just used as a tool, but not necessarily as a tool and as a slogan. But if you really look into it, the rule of many of the Muslim countries were the furthest thing from Islam. And really, understanding Quran and Sunnah and its application what has almost been completely devoid of the holistic wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Much of the understanding and the application of really human rights and women's rights in Islam in many of the countries has fallen short and has been completely divorced from this holistic wisdom and hikmah that was applied during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't really see that. People just kind of read their own interpretation and just think, no, look, this hadith says this, we must follow this. Or they just pick and choose what they like and without really trying to understand it, just to kind of propel their own narrative. So a lot of this accusation against Islam and women's right is really unfounded. It's unfounded because for many reasons. A lot of it has to do with ignorance, not knowing Islam and what Islam says, and really not what Islam says, but what Islam teaches, not really knowing Islamic history, and just making a sweeping generalization just because you see a few videos, you read a couple of articles, and now people are there, considering themselves experts on Islam and in Islamic rights when it comes to women's rights, when it comes inside Islam, or human rights in Islam. People make a lot of these judgments without really knowing what the truth actually is. And while Islam definitely Islam supports gender roles, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created men with certain strengths and weaknesses, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allocated certain responsibilities to men based off of that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given women certain strengths and weaknesses, and accordingly has given women certain rights and responsibilities that befits their role. So each gender, right, and each individual in Islamic society has their own roles to play. So it doesn't necessarily have to be exact, but in terms of their reward and their effort, it will be equal, right? We know the Quran, that men and women in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are equal. Their roles may be a little different, but that doesn't make one superior over the other, right? A woman can easily surpass a man, just staying within her role. And this role is not there as an oppression. Neither is it oppressing men, nor is it oppressing women. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Ahkamul Hakimin, and being Al-Alimul Hakim, knows what is best. He's the one who created us. And that's our belief as Muslims. And that's why we follow and we respect these roles that Islam has given. And these roles are there to protect the family unit, right? And it's not just the family, because the family unit is the most important structure. And these family units, right, are what build up these communities and societies that we live in. So that's why Islam has allocated these different rights towards men and women. And this is there so that the entire society, the family unit as a whole, the society as a whole, can function in a way that is progressive, that really can move them and take them further than they could have ever imagined. Whereas when we start to confuse these things and we move away from our natural disposition, away from our fitrah, and we demand things that are not really, meant there. To give you a good example, there was a picture that many of you probably have already seen, and you see there's a fence, and there's 3 people on the fence, 3 kids on the fence, and then there's a bunch of boxes, and you see that equal rights is not giving everybody an equal amount of boxes. The tallest one, he doesn't need 3 boxes, he only needs 1. The one that's in the middle, he needs maybe 2. And then the shortest one, he needs 3. That's equality, where everyone is able to see what's beyond the fence, what's outside the fence, right? But in their own capacity, according to their own strengths and weaknesses. That is more, how you say, just, as opposed to just giving everybody an equal piece of the pie. So that's an important thing to understand. And that's how Islam distributes rights and responsibilities between men and women. And whatever you see today has nothing to do with Islam. This is all, post-colonial cultural interpretation of religion, whether it's, groups like the Taliban or ISIS, or whether it's some sovereign Muslim government. However it is, much of their interpretation of Islam and Islamic rights, human rights and women's rights, a lot of it is just, it's just devoid and missing that holistic complete hikmah and wisdom that the Prophet ﷺ practiced and taught the Sahaba with. And there's a lot more to this, to be honest. There's a lot more to this discussion. It's a very detailed, but I just wanted to keep it very general, very open, and because I'm sure many of you probably are asking this question when you're reading these types of verses. So then we move on to verse number 32. In verse number 32, Allah and onwards, all the way down to about verse number 35, I would say. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, says, that Allah has put, the responsibility of the household upon the man. So this is a continuation. So the men are actually responsible for the household, and that is their responsibility. That doesn't mean that they should rule like Hitler, or they're supposed to be a tyrant that yes, everybody has to obey them. That's not it. It's the responsibilities, not the status that is being implied here. So that's an important thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the man, get that responsibility to take care of the household in the capacity of being the main breadwinner, and the woman in terms of taking care of the house. But when it comes to major decisions, so now from men's rights and women's right in Islam, right, or human rights and then women's rights specifically, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going more into the family unit, how the family unit should be functioning. So whenever there's any major decision that should take place in the household, it's not for the man or the husband or the breadwinner of the house to just make all the decisions and then everyone has to follow. That's not allowed in Islam. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. As Muslims, we have a responsibility. Even the Prophet ﷺ was ordered in the Quran to make mashwara with the Sahaba. He was a prophet of Allah. He received wahi, right? His obedience to him was mandatory. It's mandatory for every Muslim. But still, the Prophet ﷺ was asked to ask the opinions of the Sahaba. The same thing goes in the household. Whoever is the breadwinner of the house, or whoever the head of the household is, it's not their responsibility, or it's not for them to say whatever they want and for everyone to follow. But everyone in the household has an equal say in what happens in the future of that household. That includes the husband, the wife, and the adult children, the mature children. And when I mean adult, I don't mean 18 and over, right? As soon as the child is of an age where they have understanding, they can contribute intellectually to things. They're allowed to have a say in the household, right? And proof of this is how Ibrahim alayhi salam, when Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salam, when Ibrahim alayhi salam was given the command to go and slaughter Ismail alayhi salam, he was very young. He wasn't more than 13, 14 years old at that time. But what did he do? He talked and he consulted with his son, only being a child. And then according to that, that's how he made his decision. Even though the command was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he had to do it anyways. But even then, he's teaching a very valuable lesson. And that's how the family unit is as well. What if you go to some other country, right? Or you see a video of some husband smacking around his wife, and or just because he looks Arab or he looks Pakistani or looks whatever, that has nothing to do with our faith and our religion. These are just stigmas that are being propelled, or stereotypes that are just being propelled by people. And if you choose to believe it, that's up to you. Right? But Islam, what does Islam say? Islam allows, or it really includes everybody into what happens into the household, the future of that household. When it was something that should be dealt with equitably. Now, many times, then afterwards, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about a conflict, marriage conflict between husband and wife. What should be done in that type of situation? In that situation, remember, marriage is between two mature and responsible adults. And they must try their best to solve their problems amongst themselves first. That's the first course of action. And whenever there's an issue, what happens often this time, and this is where maturity comes into play as well. You're both married, and you have an obligation to make sure this relationship lasts. So rather than trying to have the last word or to be right all the time, look for a solution that is best. Because when two people are looking for a solution, believe me, you will find one. It won't always be on your terms. It won't always be what you like, but you will. Sometimes you may have to sacrifice. Sometimes you might gain, right? You might have the more of a say in a certain disagreement, and other times you might have to sacrifice and really let go of your ego and your kibr inside and admit that maybe you were wrong. So there's always a give and take, and sometimes a half, sometimes it's both. So whenever there's a dispute amongst husband and wife, you have to try to reconcile those differences and look for a solution. Don't try to be right. Don't talk and have a discussion just to have the last say or just to have the last word, but do it in a way that's constructive, where you're able to express yourself in the way where you can completely be, your communication is strictly open. There's no judgment, and you're being honest, right? But and while you're expressing yourself in the process of that, while one is expressing, the other is trying to understand, not just listening to respond, but understanding what the other person is saying. When you do that, believe me, you'll find a solution. There's always a solution. There's no such thing as a problem in this dunya, in this world, that doesn't have a solution. The only thing is, it doesn't always involve involve a solution that's always applicable or pleasing to you all the time. That's it. Then afterwards, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes into arbitration. Now, sometimes some conflicts will be just too hard. There will be certain situations in your marriage life that where no matter how hard you try, you just cannot reconcile your differences. In these situations, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, حَكَمَ مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمَ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا. The Quran teaches us, find an arbitrator from the husband's side and an arbitrator from the wife's side. Both those arbitrators will get together and they will help solve the issues of that marriage. They will help find a solution. Right? So that's some more extramarital advice that the Quran is giving. In extreme situations, you go by and use arbitration. Then continuing the same topic of kindness, in verse number 36 onwards, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, He's giving us advice. وَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْجَارِ الْجُنْبِ وَالصَّاحِبِ بِالْجَنْبِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. That strive to be kind all the time. As Muslims, we must always wear a cloak and a cloth and a garment of kindness at all times. Here, but before I continue, there's one important thing here in the verse. In the opening of that verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعْبُدُوا اللَّهِ, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. And this is a command, this is not an advice. And do not associate any partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and be kind to your parents. So immediately after, and this is a common thing throughout the Quran. So those who are youngsters, who are living in your parents' home, or if you're an adult, a family man, and your parents are still alive, remember your parents have rights upon you, and treat them with the utmost kindness. And with this verse, the focus of this verse is kindness, not necessarily rights, but be kind to everybody. Even even the person sitting right next to you, be kind to everybody. The orphans, your family members, the poor people, your neighbors. Again, the person sitting right next to you, you can be in a train, on a bus, traveling somewhere, or in a car, and there's someone sitting next to you. Sit in a way where you're not harming the other person, right? Don't do things that are rude and harmful to others, especially in planes. Like a lot of times it's a long journey and people just get so antsy and so aggressive. Be kind. Be kind. You yourself will have a good ride, and the people around you will also, they'll thank you for it. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you. And this is important. Going back to marriage. Marriage, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Part of mercy is kindness. We must learn how to be kind and merciful to one another. Then in verse number 29, right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَاذَا عَلَيْهِمْ لَوْ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, right? وَأَنْفَقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَهُمُ اللَّهُ. That now comes time for spending. Again, spending connects straight to kindness, and spending also connects to your family, right? That we must, as Muslims, be kind and generous as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here, spend in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is spending in the path of Allah? Spending on your family, spending on your parents, your relatives, spending on your community, your masjid, right? Especially in Ramadan, this is the time where we have to be extra kind, especially those people who have the ability to spend should spend. So spend in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because why not? Where did you get your money in the first place? It came to you from where? From Allah. Allah is the one who gave you that money. And now you might say, no, because of the job that I have. Well, where did you get that job from? Well, my boss hired me. Why did the boss hire you? It's because Allah put it in his heart. Everything goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So everything that you have, every penny, is from Allah. If Allah gave it to you, why wouldn't you spend it in His cause? Right? It's something that's common sense. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encouraging us that spend in the path of Allah. Because those who don't spend, remember, there will be consequences if you're not spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you're a believer, why wouldn't you? So it's a part of our iman, part of our faith, that we do spend. But as a reminder, in the very next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Inna Allah la yadlimu mithqala dharra. This is verse number 40 of Surah Nisa. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never ever oppresses anybody. Right? So your charity that you're giving, the money that you're spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be it to your masjid, right? In this difficult time where they're closed, there's no, there's no 5 daily prayers going on, there's no Jum'ah, we don't know if we're even going to get an Eid, there's barely any fundraising going on. Spend in the path of Allah. Because when you spend in the path of Allah and you support your masjid, or you spend on your family has needs, your relatives, your community members. Remember, Inna Allah la yadlimu mithqala dharra. Allah will not let your charity go unrewarded. You will be rewarded in this world and the hereafter. And this is a promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many places in the Quran, not just in here or other places. Many places in the Quran, Allah promises that person that as long as you worship Allah subhanahu, as long as you give in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as long as you are trying your utmost to be charitable, Allah will reward you in this world. So the money that you're spending, you're going to get that money back. And not only that, also the reward in the hereafter, that's an extra. So you're going to get rewarded both ways, inshallah. Then verse number 44 to about verse number 53, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now talks about people before us, the previous ummahs, how many of them preached falsehood. And they themselves were going astray, and they want other people to go astray as well. Some of them would twist words, right? Wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would teach them, right? Rather than sami'na wa ata'na, they would say sami'na wa asayna. Rather than we obey and we listen, we obey, they would say we listen and we disobey. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning us, don't follow in the footsteps of the previous nations, of the previous people. Rectify yourselves. You have a chance right now to make amends, right? Do it before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides that enough is enough. And then He decides to take, He decides to take something from you, and or either in the form of your life or your wealth or your health or something. So whatever Allah has given you, don't follow like in the footsteps of the people before you, and disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and disrespect your faith and your fellow Muslims. Because when Allah's punishment comes, it comes suddenly. Then verse number 49, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Alam tara ila alladhina yuzakkuna anfusahum balillahu yuzakki man yasha wa la yudlamuna fatila. That there will be people who will claim to be righteous and pious, that we're always on the right path and we are, we're on haqq. They're always claiming to be on haqq. When someone claims that, there's something wrong. Right? And the next verse essentially calls them liars. That these people, they're just lying. They're not really telling the truth. And you have to be careful of these types of people, these very self-righteous people who claim that they are on the right path all the time and everyone else is wrong. And in reality, they themselves are the furthest from the right path. They may speak with the Quran and Sunnah, and maybe speak very nice, sweet words, and words that create inside of a person a lot of emotion and a lot of encouragement. But in reality, they're not on the right path. So you have to be careful of these types of people. Don't fall for these types of people and their propaganda. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the next verse, again giving us some more examples. Verse number 51. ألم تر إلى الذين أوتوا نصيب من الكتاب يؤمنون بالجبت والطاغوت ويقولون للذين كفروا هؤلاء أهدى من الذين آمنوا سبيلا. A little background for this verse is that once the Banu Qurayza, they decided to defy, or the Jewish tribe, they decided to go against the Prophet ﷺ. They wanted to get rid of the Muslims. So what they did, they traveled all the way to Mecca, and they decided to have a meeting with them. And what they wanted to instigate the mushrikeen against fighting the Prophet ﷺ. This is like the beginning parts of the Ahzab, the Battle of Ahzab. Before that, these are precursors to that. So, and they're trying to get all this support, all these tribes to come and just annihilate the Muslims once and for all. So the mushrikeen, Abu Sufyan, if I'm not mistaken, he asked, who's on the right path? You guys are people of the book. You know better. Are we on the right path or are they on the right path? So the Jews, they said, no, you guys are on the right path. We know better, and you guys are indeed on the right path. And indeed, what this message is all about, and the message of this verse, that there will be people who know the truth. They know about Islam. They know Islam is the truth, or they know that Islam is there is, even if they don't believe in Islam, they know there's inherent goodness in Islam. There's a lot of goodness. But because of their bigotry and their hatred, they will lie. Just like at that time, the Yahud at the time, they lied to the mushrikeen, and they lied to them and telling the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ that, you know what, you guys are on the right path. Likewise, there will be people like that. So again, be careful of these types of people. And then again, and remember now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's really showing us how much He cares. He's warning us. And this warning that Allah in these next few verses is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really showing His favor, His love for us. And that, just like you have a father, when a father, he's gonna warn his son or his daughter about the harshness of life, about real life. There's people out there who are going to try to hurt you and harm you, and you just got to be strong. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching, is really how He's talking to us, rather, in these verses, is that, there will be people and they're going to be working against you. You've got to be united. You got to work hard, right? And this in verse number 54. أَمْ يَحْسُدُونَ النَّاسَ عَلَى مَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ فَقَدْ آتَيْنَا آلَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ مُلْكًا عَظِيمًا. That there are many people who will envy you, and they will envy you for all the good things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And they will look at you and they will look at you in awe. And this envy will be the foundation of their hatred against you. Right? So be careful of this hasad that's being mentioned in this verse, this envy and this jealousy that's within these people, and be conscious and cognizant of it. Don't ignore it. Then verse number 56, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the punishment of those people who reject this message and they stop others from conveying the message of Islam. So there will be many people like that. They themselves won't practice Islam, and anybody who tries to preach and teach Islam, they'll try to shut those people down as well. So be careful about those people as well. And those people, not necessarily non-Muslims, they could be also Muslims. People who pretending to be Muslims who will just reject anything that comes their way, and they'll just stop anybody who tries to convey the message of Islam. They're like, oh, don't listen to him. They're just being backward or whatever. So be cautious and careful of these types of people as well. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا. Verse number 58. Allah asks us to fulfill the rights of other people and His rights as well. That, whenever someone entrusts you with something, it could be something monetary, maybe a material item, or it could be something, a responsibility. Somebody trusts you with a certain responsibility, fulfill those responsibilities, right? And be trustworthy and be truthful. وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ. And when you're asked to judge between people, be just. Don't take sides with people. So what is this trust now? What is this amana? We know with people, we know what that amana could be. But with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is that amana? In the very next verse number 59. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. O you who believe, obey Allah and obey His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and those people who have been charged with authority amongst you. So whoever is responsible, people, whether it's the person who is the head of the state of your country, whether it's your governor, your mayor, even if it's the leaders of your local masjid, listen to what they have to say. That doesn't mean you follow them blindly, but you listen to what they have to say. فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. It's going to happen. You're going to have differences of opinions, or maybe they're going to say something wrong. If this happens, you have a dispute with the leader of maybe it's your imam, maybe it's the board member of your masjids, right, or your masajid, maybe as a leader of some organization. If there's something wrong, be upfront, say it, right? Talk about it. And then in order to find the solution, فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِ, go back to Quran and Sunnah. That's where you're going to find the solution. And no matter what kind of situation you are in, what kind of disagreement you will have, if you refer back to Allah to Rasul, and you truly try your best in that, you will find the solution, inshallah. Then in verse number 63, أولئك الذين يعلم الله ما في قلوبهم فأعرض عنهم وعظهم وقل لهم في أنفسهم قولا بليغا. There still may be people who may disagree with you. They may have disagreements. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's inside of their hearts. Doesn't matter what's inside of their heart. That's not your business. That's not your job and my job to judge what's in a person's heart. But what is our responsibility is وَعِظْهُمْ, is to give them, always give them good counseling. وَقُلْ لَهُمْ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ قَوْلًا بَلِيغًا. And we say to them, right, to them in a way that is effective. So when someone disagrees with you, and maybe you have more knowledge, then talk to them in a way that's good counseling. Counseling, when you counsel someone, it's because you care about them. So talk to them in a way where they know you care. You're not trying to be obnoxious. You're not trying to have a one-up on them. You're not trying to impeach them because you're holier than they are. No, you're trying to counsel them because you care. So when you have a disagreement with somebody, talk to them in a way where they can feel that you care. And say it in a way. The way you talk is also important. This is something that's so underrated and people just don't pay attention to it enough. Sometimes you may say something. Yes, you may sometimes say something right. You may be on haqq, but how you say it is also important. Because the objective, the whole maqsad, is that you convey a message and that they understand what that message is. If you're conveying the message in a bad way, it may be the right message, but then it's your fault if you're not trying to convey it in a way that is relatable. Especially those people who are elders. Especially if you're working with the youth, maybe you're a marriage counselor, or you're just a counselor between different people. You have to talk in an effective and relatable manner. This is also very, very important. Then verse number 72, verse number 72 and 73 actually. There are two groups here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about. One, وَإِن مِّنكُمْ لَمَن لَيُمَطِّئَنَّ فَإِنْ أَصَابَتْكُم مُّصِيبَةٌ قَالَ قَدْ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيَّ إِذْ لَمْ أَكُن مَّعَهُمْ شَهِيدًا. And then وَلَئِنْ أَصَابَكُم فَضْلٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لَيَقُولُنَّ, they'll say basically, يَا لَيْتَنِي كُنتُ مَعَهُمْ فَأَفُوزَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. That there are those people, and these are Muslims we're talking about. When you're in a bad situation, they're just going to point fingers at you and they're going to blame you. And when you're in a good situation, they're like, oh, we're with you. Our hearts are with you. We support you 100%. And, we're always going to back you all the way. Even we wish we can be with you as well. So there will always be these types of people who will support you and they will be next to you in your times of victory and your times of honor. But as soon as things sour and they go south, they'll be the first people to blame you and point fingers at you. So whether it's your social life, whether it's your work life, be careful with these types of people. Don't keep these people around you. They don't deserve to be around you because they're not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. Stay very far away. You don't need this kind of toxic friendship or this type of toxic relationship with these types of people. They're just not worth your time. And the Quran is warning us about these types of people. Then this continues all the way down to verse number 80. Then verse number 80, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the solution to all of this is simply to follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when you follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everything good will happen. And the added bonus is that you'll have the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then verse number 90 to 91, whenever someone wants peace, make sure you make an agreement with that person. And if you find them insincere and oppressive, then it's your responsibility to stand up for your rights. So be kind to people and be good with people whenever they want it, right? Always look for peace. That's the objective of a Muslim. But when someone is trying to take away your hukuk and your rights, then you also have a responsibility to yourself and your family to stand up for your rights as well. Then verse number 93, we talk about how Muslims are never ever allowed to kill anybody. If a Muslim ever takes a life, then that person, right, they will live in the وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ وَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا. That person will live in the hellfire, جَهَنَّمَ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا, forever. So any Muslim who takes an innocent life, Muslim or non-Muslim, you take any life, innocent life, you will never receive the Jannah. You will always stay in the fire of hell, and you'll have the curse upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you, and a very painful punishment. Then verse number 94, we are never allowed to do takfir about other people. Verse number 97, those who spread mischief and corruption around the earth, there are people who will be like that. Maybe they're suffering financially, And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling in this verse that, you know what, just because you're suffering financially, hey, maybe wherever you're living is not good enough for you, then travel the earth. The earth of Allah, the world is a very vast place, right? Alam takun ardullahi wasi'ah. Was the earth of Allah not wide enough for you? Was it not vast enough for you? Could you not migrate to somewhere else where you can make a better living? So scamming people and doing bad business practices, there's no excuse for that. Then verse number 101 to 102, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that your prayer should never ever be missed under any circumstances, even in situations of conflict. Even if you're in a war zone, you never miss your prayer. 114, always unify yourselves, and the actions, whatever actions you do, you should always be according to that. As a Muslim, we should always try to be a one cohesive unit. Then in verse 125, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, who can be better than that person who works hard and seeks the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We often assume the status quo that, you know what, I have the right intention as Muslims, we just need to do the bare minimum. No, keep striving. If you're a Muslim, try to be a good Muslim. Don't just be a regular Muslim. Because people, for some reason, whenever they see Muslims trying hard to be better, for some reason they don't like it. That should be, that should be not be the case at all. Then in verse 135, that justice is Allah's attribute. Justice is Allah's attribute. Anybody who stands for justice, even if it's against themselves, maybe their mother or father, their brother or sister, stand up for justice. Because when you stand up for justice, you stand up for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it's against yourself. 147, and from here we'll kind of conclude. Allah gains not, and this is my favorite verse by far, this entire juz. مَا يَفْعَلُ اللَّهُ بِعَذَابِكُمْ إِن شَكَرْتُمْ آمَنْتُمْ. What business, what reason does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have to punish you if you're grateful to Allah? Allah has no interest at all whatsoever to punish you, and if you are grateful to Him, وَكَانَ اللَّهُ شَاكِرًا عَلِيمًا, and Allah Himself is grateful for and appreciative for the things that you do. Whatever little work, effort that you do, please Allah appreciates that. And with this we conclude the verse. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us and bless our families. I'll make a very, very short dua, then we can continue your dua until iftar, inshallah. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام. ربنا حينا بالسلام وادخلنا دار السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.